Okay, so let's unpack a really heavy hitter today for this deep dive. We are looking at a paper with a pretty imposing title, actually. The Architecture of Developmental Regression.
Yeah, it sounds super academic, but I mean, it's actually a really gripping forensic analysis of Ghana's industrial trajectory.
Right, from 1957 all the way up to 2026. And this analysis comes from the Common Purpose Alliance, Ghana, or CPAG. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We are trying to understand the mechanics of the divergence.
Exactly, because you have to wonder why Ghana's development path split so sharply from peers like Singapore and South Korea.
Yeah, because looking back, they basically started at very similar starting lines. In the early 1960s, Ghana had a GDP per capita of around $180. Singapore was at what, about $430?
Right, they were totally in the same ballpark. And today, Singapore is over $88,000, while Ghana is hovering around $2,400.
The source argues this wasn't just an accident of geography or resources. It was a fundamental difference in their operating systems.
Let's look at Ghana's original operating system, the Nkrumah era. The notes highlight the 7-year development plan, and the data from that time is wild. Manufacturing output was growing at 13% annually.
Its share of GDP rose from just 2% to 9%. The state wasn't just regulating.
It was acting as the entrepreneur.
And there was this great visual example in the paper about the city of Tama. It wasn't just a construction project. It was a philosophical cage match between planners.
That really illustrates the tension. You had Alfred Alcock, the English planner, who wanted these neighborhood units. It was essentially replicating an English village style.
Which is cozy, but totally backward looking. You can't run an industrial revolution from a garden city.
Right. So they switched to Constantinos Doxiadis and his concept of acoustics. He laid out this gridiron model designed for unlimited growth.
A complete shift from colonial nostalgia to high-speed efficiency.
Yeah.
But then the system crashed.
February 24, 1966. The source argues the coup wasn't just a regime change. It was the termination of a developmental experiment.
It shifted the whole country into winner-takes-all politics. And this is where the Singapore comparison really hurts.
While Ghana was basically tearing up previous projects just to deny opponents credit, Singapore leaned hard into meritocracy and pragmatism.
Specifically, they paid their civil servants strictly competitive salaries to prevent corruption. They insulated their technical experts from politics.
In contrast, the paper argues Ghana fell into political patronage, hiring based on loyalty rather than competence.
And that structural weakness made the 1980s devastating. The source uses a really strong phrase here, the tragedy of neoliberalism.
Referring to the structural adjustment programs, or SAPs.
And just as a quick timeout for you listening, this paper touches on heavily debated economic and political policies from both sides of the spectrum. We aren't endorsing any of these viewpoints or taking sides. We are purely just unpacking the arguments laid out in the CPAC analysis.
Exactly. And their argument here is that while SAPs stabilized inflation, they effectively deindustrialized the country.
By opening markets way too early.
Yeah, local manufacturing just couldn't compete, so the economy reverted back to just exporting raw materials like cocoa and gold.
Which brings us to the modern symptoms of that decay. The CPAG analysis points to the SML scandal between 2024 and 2026 as a prime example of pseudo-technocracy.
That is a key term to remember. It's when the state hires a private middleman for revenue assurance, something the state should absolutely be doing internally.
It weakens institutions by creating parallel private bureaucracies that just bleed public funds, which hits you directly in the wallet.
Look at the utilities. Tariffs went up in 2026, even though the currency had appreciated. The source calls this the inefficiency tax.
Consumers were forced to pay for 27% technical and commercial losses. You aren't paying for power at that point. You are paying for the system's inability to stop waste.
So is there a way out? The paper proposes technocratic social developmentalism, or TSD.
It sounds complex, but it basically boils down to a sovereign reset, betting on yourself.
Instead of running to the IMF for loans, the source suggests mobilizing Ghana's $25 billion domestic pension fund industry to finance industrialization.
And on the tech side, they call for digital sovereignty, implementing automated systems like SCADA for utilities to just remove human error.
And remove human discretion from revenue collection. Automate the process, and you strip away the opportunity for patronage.
It is a bold vision to insulate the money and the brains from the politics. The source concludes that Ghana's regression is purely due to failing to insulate technical management from that political volatility.
But they also push for a 24-hour economy run by this technocratic elite, which raises a massive question.
Right. If this implementation gap is really just a result of political interference, would handing the keys over to a strictly technocratic elite actually solve the problem?
Or would we just be creating a new, untouchable class of gatekeepers who answer to no one?
Efficiency always comes with a price tag. The question is whether it's one you are willing to pay. Something provocative for you to chew on today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Catch you next time.
Okay, so